Okay, welcome everybody. I don't know, is this anybody's first time here to the Savoy Museum? All right, well, welcome. So I'm not sure if you're here to see the cars or get out of the heat, so hopefully both. But I'd like to welcome all the students from Georgia Tech here. We've had a great exhibition of their cars, and they're, coming here on a Saturday, to talk to you guys about all the work that they did on those cars. And we really appreciate them taking their time to come here and talk about it for us. So again, we'll get to that here in a second. I just want to cover a couple things that's going to be happening at the Savoy. So next event is going to be here in the theater. So we have Smokey and the Bandit, and that's going to be coming up here, looks like September 15th. I couldn't quite see the monitor. So that's a Friday night, so it'll be a good date night. You guys can come on up here, watch Smokey and the Bandit. And the other thing we got coming up are new exhibits. We have Streamlined Elegance. That's the Tatras. So we have 5 Tatras, if you guys aren't familiar with them. They're Czechoslovakian vehicles. I think they started around 1934. And they were like the 3rd oldest automotive manufacturer. So come up and see those. They're air-cooled, rear engine, well, most of them. We also have Evolution of Bigfoot. They'll be starting in October. So we got 3 Bigfoots, actual Bigfoots. They'll be right down the Great Hall. So that'll be fun. We got European Art Deco. And we also have some renderings from the GM Design Studio. So we have actual watercolors, back before they actually had CAD systems that you guys are all familiar with. And so we actually have that artwork that the designers did for the cars. So now I'd like to pass it on to Jake. Jake's going to kind of get us started here talking about the Competition Center.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Jake Tompkins. I'm the only paid person who gets to be at the Student Competition Center. Everybody else just works for free, which is great. I mean, it's great for me to get paid to be there at least, but not for everybody else. We are just so blessed at Georgia Tech to have administration and a faculty that recognize that hands-on engineering is a core part of the education of engineers. And that it doesn't just affect both our mechanical engineers, but it affects not only all of our engineering disciplines, but our business majors, our industrial designers, everything that we possibly could incorporate into that. And so the center itself is, kind of owned by the university. The mechanical engineering department puts in my salary, and they put in a number of funding, and then we get funding from all sorts of other sponsors to be able to make this center run. Each of the teams gets money from SGA. We're very grateful for the student government to give us operational budgets, and then we're very grateful to all of our sponsors. So I want to hand it off to Alex Repp, who's actually going to go over a better description of the entire center and how we operate. Alex is our president of the governing board. So Alex, why don't you come on up? And Alex is going to talk through that.
Yeah, thank you, Jake. So yeah, I'll just go over kind of an overview of what the Student Competition Center is. We've been really blessed to put on this exhibit. Really gracious to kind of explain to you guys what we do from a top level and then go into what the teams do individually. So about myself, I am Alex Repp, like Jake said. I'm originally from Calhoun, Georgia. I graduated from Calhoun High School in 2020. I'm a 4th-year senior biomedical engineering major. In addition to being the SEC president, I'm also on GT Motorsports as our driver manager and a driver controls engineer. So with that, this is just a lot of words about our vision as the SEC, but really the key point is supercurricular experiences. So we're looking to provide students at Georgia Tech with an opportunity to do stuff that they can't do in the classroom, they can't do in the lab, and they can't read in a textbook. We're really giving them an opportunity to put their knowledge into an application environment where they can build a car, build a robot, build a component, work in a team where it's beyond the 4 walls of the classroom, and it's something that you really can't get anywhere else on campus, and it's something that is really unique to this section of our lives while we're in college, learning about engineering and learning about all these different disciplines and how we can apply it to these different areas. So This is our space. We're made up of 7 different competition teams. 6 of them make cars. 1 makes a bunch of different robots. We've got 5 teams represented in the exhibit, so those 5 cars are going to be here. And they will tell you about their individual teams as we get to them. But yeah, that's our teams. And then going into our top-down organization, so we have the 7 individual teams. We have 4 officers, so myself and 3 other fantastic officers in the front that serve as our vice president, treasurer, and secretary that help me administratively set up events like this, bring in sponsors, do outreach, stuff like that. We also have our faculty advisor. So we have a faculty advisor for the space, Dr. Mayer, as well as other advisors that work for each of the teams as kind of their liaison, their representative to the school. Whatever that team may need, that's kind of their point of contact between the students and the institute itself. Then obviously we have Jake, who you've already met, who is our wonderful staff manager, and then 3 volunteer committees that we function to do other events, bring in sponsors, work for facility upgrades, stuff like that. So our space itself is about a mile north of campus. We are on 14th Street. We have a very large facility, 15,000 square feet, which is divided into 7 different garages for each team, as well as common machining areas, paint booth, carbon fiber areas, stuff that we provide as a space that's shared amongst all the teams to build the cars. And then we provide 24/7 access for students who are members of these teams to work on the cars, do machining, do design at any hour that they'd like to fit within their schedule. So really the key point here that I do want to reiterate is knowledge application. So the entire point of the SEC is to apply not just what you learn in class, but things that you can't learn in class. You can learn design methods, you can learn how CFD works, you can learn what you need to do all these things to build a race car, but you don't get to do it in class. A class is not going to put you on a Haas, they're not going to put you on a CNC, they may let you do some assembly, but they're not going to let you put together a transmission, and you're not going to get to drive it on track. So we really provide that go-between of the manufacturing and design skills, and then putting it on track, working as a team, doing everything that goes into being a racing team. And that shows through success. So first is just on-track success. 20 wins in the past decade. Both of these numbers are within the past 10 years, so we've been growing very fast. And we've seen that even with COVID being in the middle of these numbers. We still have phenomenal results combined amongst all the teams. There's also dozens of top 10 finishes that don't even make it into these numbers. So just to see the success of the teams is kind of the most rewarding aspect that you can put on paper. But you can also have the representation. So that's a key point of my job, is to represent the space and represent the students. And there's nothing that's really more rewarding than getting out on campus, seeing massive crowds of people coming that want to join the space, that want to join these teams. Putting on visits for our sponsors and our faculty supporters and people on campus, as well as hosting tours and events for other organizations on campus. It's really very fun to kind of represent the teams to campus and to outside, such as events like this. And then also career placement. So obviously, we're all going to college not just for fun. We want to have a career afterwards as well. So this is just a small sample of companies that we have had someone from the SEC that I directly know intern or work at outside of their time at the SEC. So we have everything from top levels of motorsport, massive auto manufacturers, space industry, medical device, research. If you name it, it probably has someone from the SEC working at that company. There are 19 Fortune 500 companies that have employed an SEC student within the past 5 years. And so this is just something that speaks to the success of the space. And now I'm just going to hand it off to the teams, let them tell you about their cars now that I've kind of introduced the space. But yeah, we'll head right into solar. So, Ariana?
Okay, hello everybody and welcome. My name is Ariana Garbers and I am the president of the solar racing team here at Georgia Tech. So this is not the car that you saw outside, but I'll kind of go into what we do, who we are, and how we work. So yeah, my name again, Ariana Garbers. I'm a fourth year industrial engineering student. So like Alex said, our space is made up of all different kinds of engineers, but mostly they're mechanical and electrical. So as an industrial engineer, I work on a lot of processes. So that's actually helped us a lot with solar racing because there's a lot of different details that go into how we work. I'm from Roswell, Georgia. Before I was our race ops lead, and I also was previous vice president of the entire space. So I've been on the team since my freshman year, excited to keep going through until I finish my master's in next fall. So who are we? We are a student organization like all of the other teams, and we're really trying to push the cutting edge of hyper-efficient vehicle technology. So we design, build, and race all students fully solar-powered electric cars. So we race these both in a cross-country event, but also in a track-style event. We were founded in 2003, and we completed our first Challenger class vehicle, so that's SJ1, which you might have seen outside, in 2012. So a little history about all of our cars here. In 2008, we had our Audi project, which we were founded in 2003, but it was just getting off of our feet. So in 2008, we converted, slapped some solar panels on an Audi, and raced with that car. And then in 2013, we actually competed with SJ1, which is the car that you saw outside. It took about a year to design, build, test before we went full on to competition. Then after that, we have SR2, which is a bit different of a design of the car, and you kind of can see that we have different shapes and things that we've been experimenting with. So that was in 2018. Our most recent vehicle is SR3, so that was built in 2019 on a very fast design cycle, but we've raced it for the past 3 years. And then coming was kind of the mock-up of the car that you saw, which is going to be SR4. And this car is going to be a multi-occupant vehicle. So all of the cars we have designed in the past have all been single-occupant vehicles. This car is going to be a 4-seater. So we're really trying to show and follow the Georgia Tech motto of progress and service, that we can actually use solar cars in the future. You can put your kids in it, put your soccer balls in it, take them to soccer practice, and it'll actually be really awesome for renewable energy and all of those things. So going into our competitions, we have 2 of them, like I said, Formula Sun Grand Prix, which is an annual track race hosted by the Innovators Educational Foundation. So we've raced in this race pretty much for our entirety of our organization. And in previous races, it's been hosted at the Circuit of the Americas, which if you're with Formula One, that's where Formula One cars race. So it was a really awesome opportunity. Here's a picture from that. And then most recently, we've worked in the Heartland Motorsports Park. So that's out in Kansas. So that track event, the 3 days prior to the event, we have inspection because this car is built by college students, it's driven by college students, but we are operating on real roads after the formula race. So this formula race serves to kind of qualify the car, make sure the car is safe in a controlled setting. You're racing, as you can see, on the track with other solar cars right next to you from all different colleges around the country and even internationally. Going into, here's some pictures you can see from the race. You can see our shop space, so we have a garage that we kind of go through to work through all of the different things because they inspect all the different parts of the car. And yeah, we have to, one of the fun things is our driver egress. You can see that picture, it's a great picture. That's actually on the track, so our drivers have to be able to get out of our car in 10 seconds or less, which if you saw the inside of the other car a little bit, it's kind of a cramped space in there because we're really trying to maximize for that aerodynamic performance. So it is kind of a fun thing there. Going into our American Solar Challenge. So this is a cross-country race. We are racing on actual roads. So these are either frontage roads or highways. To keep the car safe, we have a normal car in the front, which is our lead car, the solar car, and then a car behind, which is our chase car. And so in 2021, we took our most recent vehicle from Independence, Missouri to Las Vegas, New Mexico, which if you need a jogger for your American geography, that's just shy of 1,000 miles. So on all of our races, we start with 100% in our battery pack, and then from then on, it's all based off of solar energy. So a big thing for us is really trying to model how our performance is going to be. Yes, we are a racing team, but all of our races are endurance-based. So we can go up to 55 miles per hour with the car that you saw out there, but we generally aim for around 30, 35. To keep it the most efficient. Because if it's really super sunny one day and there's lots of clouds outside the next day and you're not taking that into account, it'll mess you up because it's in the endurance race. So here's some pictures from us along the Santa Fe Trail in 2021. It was my first time racing, and the entire race team actually there, it was their first time doing that race. We were a newer team. It was an awesome opportunity, one of my favorite experiences in college so far. So getting in a little bit more to the car that you saw outside, SJ1. So the design, again, began in 2011, and we raced that car in FSGP events, so those track-style events, until 2017. So it was our team's first race-worthy Challenger class vehicle. It weighed around 400 kilograms with our driver, and you might be thinking, can we put our shortest driver in there to kind of save on weight? All of the drivers are kind of the same weight that they ballast for the competition so that everybody's equal. And then, like I said, there's top speeds of 55 miles per hour. Here's a couple more facts. So with our solar panels, we generate 1,100 watts of power with 20% efficient cells. Our entire aero body is made out of carbon fiber, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's a very structurally sound material, but it's also super lightweight. So this is great for us because we're really working towards that efficiency. We've got a 3.85 kilowatt hour battery pack, and we are designed to withstand the 5G impact. So there's all different rules and regulations that all the different competition teams have to follow, and ours are a little bit different because we are racing on real roads, and so the car withstood that impact. And yeah, this car, compared to our other cars, this car actually is a 3-wheel design, which they have taken away and then re-brought back. So most of our other cars now are 4-wheel cars. But yeah, that is about SJ1. I guess we'll save time for questions, I think, at the end, but I'll pass it off to Rec Racing here.
Hello, everyone. I'll switch. There we go. We're from Rec Racing at Georgia Tech. My name is Kyle Sosha. I am the president of the club and a third-year mechanical engineering major.
My name's Kanda Nataraja. I am a mechanical engineering major and a third year as well, and I'm the lead engineer of Rec Racing.
So who are we? Georgia Tech. We are the budget racing team, so we're a little different than the other teams in that we have to operate in the constraints of very little money. So I'll get to that in the next slide. So our team is about 80 members. We have people from across all majors. We accept anyone from any major because we want a wide knowledge base. And in 2023, we placed 6th overall, and we placed 2nd overall in 2022 with the truck in the picture, and that sits outside. Also last year, we celebrated our 20th anniversary of Rec Racing and competing at the Gainesville Raceway. So our competition, we compete at the Grassroots Motorsports $2,000 Challenge. Which is run by a magazine, so it's not run by SAE. There's people from all ages, all skill levels. There's a few other college teams, but what's cool about our competition is that we compete against people who are home-built hobbyists, and then also engineers across the industry, so we get to pick their brain and gain valuable insight in that aspect. So at our competition, we compete in autocross, which is cones in a parking lot, about a minute course, and then a quarter-mile drag race, as well as an engineering design review. So our car has to handle, it has to go fast in a straight line, and it also has to show creativity, which is why out there we have the crazy contraption that you see that Condon will explain.
Okay, so yeah, the car you see outside is a Chevy S10, if you didn't recognize it. We bought this car for around $400 off of Facebook Marketplace, and we quickly cut the car down completely to the frame rails. We took off the front clip, the bed, everything. And from there, we built a custom suspension that you can see on the car as well. We then mounted an Acura V6 engine in the back of the truck to make it a mid-engine sport truck. We really focused on lightweight, low center of gravity, and basically built this car mainly to compete well in the autocross. And in 2022, we placed 37th, which is actually, I think, last place.
like third to last.
Yeah.
There are a few people who like exploded before it even
Yeah.
started. So
Our former lead engineer got a little too excited and launched it a little hard, and we snapped an axle on our first drag pass, so we didn't get a qualifying time, hence our finish. And then we brought the car back in 2023, and we ended up placing second after we fixed a few minor issues with the car. So right now we've switched on. We usually do our cars for about 2 years. So now we're building a 300ZX. So this car has a kit car chassis built by Factory 5. We bought it as an EV converted car that had like a battery malfunction and it burned to the ground. So we got it for really cheap. And then we put a Honda K24 4-cylinder engine in the back of this car as well, made it to a Subaru transmission. This car placed 6th last year in this year, and we hope to run it again in April and probably add forced induction and hopefully fix a few suspension things.
yep. And I think I skipped over, at least I said budget at the beginning, but everything on these cars is for $2,000 or less. So we go to junkyards, Facebook, like Condon said. We make stuff, weld things together, all just to make cars that look like this one. And so it's a very fun team. Yeah, thank you.
Next up, we have HyTech Racing.
Hey guys, it's nice to see everybody here. So the Student Competition Center is a pretty special place. I had some reservations about coming here because we're in the middle of our design cycle. But in the first 10 minutes, I actually learned a lot about about solar racing and rec racing. Those were pretty interesting themes. And you know, over the course of these years, we have built some very complex projects, and that's pretty impressive. In my first year, I came all the way from Thailand. I had 2 broken wrists. I had no clue about how to build a car. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that experience because you start from scratch. You don't really know much about building a car. But the people around you help you build it, and with time and effort over the course of time, you come a long way. So a little bit more about our team. We're HyTech Racing. We build an electric car from scratch, and our design cycle is over the course of a single year. And we compete in the Formula Student Competition. And our goal is to build the next generation of engineers using the pursuit of performance as a tool. So while all these cars are amazing and all these teams are very multidisciplinary, at our core, the Student Competition Center is not just building these vehicles for competition. The end goal is to build these complete engineers. And over the time, we learn a lot of interesting things. So a little bit more about our team. Like all the other teams, we have many different majors, a wide variety of people. And because there's so many different projects to build a complete car, there's also different majors and pretty unique things to work on. So again, going into our process, we have a 1-year cycle where we design, build, and compete. So the first phase is where we start off designing the car. That's what we're currently in right now, and it's pretty intense. And this is where we put the car in CAD. We're doing some basic testing and prototyping. Once that's done, that usually lasts about 4 months. We move on to build and assemble the car. Now this is usually the most intense part of our entire cycle, because things go wrong. You think about how something looks really beautiful in your 3D model, and when it comes in real life, it's a complete disaster. I'm sure most of the teams here can relate to that, because this phase right here is usually the longest and most challenging time of the year for all the teams. Once that's done, you have your fully assembled car. You've spent a lot of long nights building this thing. Now you have to test it to see how different components work. And we usually never get it right the first time. And it takes about 1 or 2 months of testing to get to a point where we're ready to compete. And finally, we have our competition in Michigan in June, where we have a bunch of different events, not just a dynamic race event, but there's some static events where we go through inspection for our mechanical and electrical systems. Because at the end of the day, a bunch of student engineers build this car, and there's a battery pack that is very, very dangerous. In fact, at our competition this year, one of the battery packs literally blew up because it was in the back of a car and it caught fire due to the heat. So yeah, in rigorous tech inspection, and once that's done, we then go on to a design review where judges from industry really grill us on how we went about designing this thing. Once all the static events are done, we move on to our dynamic events. This is what we actually design and prepare our car for. We have our straight line acceleration, skid pad, autocross, and endurance. Now, the last event has been a little tricky for our team in the past couple of years. Endurance is basically us running the car around a lap for 22 kilometers. So a history of our team. In 2021, so HTO5, we placed second overall. And that was a pretty tight finish because we almost did not pass inspection. The second year, we were much better prepared. HTO6, the car you see outside, that came third overall. And we blazed through inspection. Things were going amazing. On the last day, we were half a lap away from completing our final event for endurance. And one of our battery cells faulted. And in the middle of the track, we couldn't compete anymore. So we were half a lap, if that, from finishing the entire race. So that was pretty disappointing, but we managed to finish third overall. And this year, this was the fastest car we have ever built. HTO7 broke the North American acceleration record. The 0 to 60 on this thing is close to 2 seconds, so this is Tesla Roadster level. Now, while this car is super fast, we did extremely well at our competition. Things were going amazing. Now, coming back to endurance. Endurance is a little bit of a problematic thing in our competitions. And right as we were about to run, the car we heard a noise on the radio, and it was our president saying, HTO7 is coming back from the paddock. Stay in the paddock. And that was pretty scary because we couldn't run an HTO7. There was a faulty pedal sensor, and at the last minute, we had to pull out of the race. But I think the beautiful part about all our teams is the 10 months, 1 year, or however long it takes to actually build the car. Because, you know, our competition is 1 week long. And if you've put all your hopes up for this 1 week event and it doesn't go as planned, which is usually the case, it can get pretty depressing. But if the 10 months before you had the best time of your life building this car, things are pretty fun. And this was a nightmare to build at some points, but it's at the same time really fun to work on. So the challenge on going from HTO6 to HTO7 was that we transitioned from a rear-wheel drive to an all-wheel drive with hub motors. Now, that sounds very simple in principle, but it involves a complete redesign of all of our subsystems pretty much. So our powertrain, we switched from a rear-wheel drive to having hub motors, so now you have a completely different gearbox. Your suspension, you have different points on the suspension, completely redesigned suspension. Our aero package got upgraded. So all these changes, while by themselves are pretty difficult, when you integrate them all in one seamless system, it is incredibly more challenging. And this last year was probably the most intense cycle we've ever experienced. In 10 months, we went from having no car at all to have a completely functioning HTO7. And the first night we saw this car, we tested the car, nobody expected this thing to work, because that's the usual case with all of our cars. But when we saw this thing run in Excel, that 0 to 60 kick in with no optimization, no aero package, we were amazed. That was one of the best days of my life. But yeah, HTO7 was great, but the process is what's very, very important. And as I mentioned, right now is a very busy time of the year for us. We're building HTO8, designing it right now. We have a very tight deadline coming up. And yeah, so a few closing remarks. I tried to give you an honest insight into how our team works. It's pretty similar to all the other teams here. And the result can go up or down, but we try our best to have a team culture where we truly enjoy the process. And thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope you have a great day.
Hi, we're Georgia Tech Off-Road, and today I'm going to be talking about the car you see out there, the OR7 Resilience. So starting with introductions, my name is Francesca. I'm the team lead of GT Off-Road. I'm a third-year mechanical engineering major.
Hello, everyone. My name is Stephen Britton. I'm the chief engineer for this year's team, and I'm a third year Georgia Tech, and I'm also a mechanical engineering major.
So first I'll talk a little bit about our team. We're Georgia Tech's official Baja SAE team, and we design a single-seat off-road vehicle, and we compete in 3 Baja SAE competitions per year. Actually, this year will be our first year competing at 3. We're competing in 2 weeks, actually. It's really fun. We have 40 team members. We're divided into 4 main sub-teams, which is mechanical data acquisition. So data acquisition is all of our sensors and stuff. We have manufacturing and our business team.
All right, yeah, and to get in a little bit about like what the competition is, so similar to kind of HyTech's like FSAE, there's some like static events where we go through like a tech inspection to make sure that everything on the car is safe, and then there's a couple like business and design presentations where we kind of get evaluated on how well we've gone through the design process and like built a solid car. And then kind of the main dynamic events that we have are all listed above. The first 4 are like the kind of like subsections of like how we can evaluate the car. So the first one is just a straight up acceleration test where it's normally like 100 foot or 150 foot where we're just trying to get our fastest time in there. And then the next one is sled pull, where it's like evaluating kind of like your traction and ability to pull things. So you're pulling a sled that gradually gets heavier and provides more resistance, so you're trying to pull that as far as you can to get points. And then yeah, we have maneuverability, testing maneuverability and being able to kind of go through a bunch of cones as fast as we can. And then we also have suspension and traction, which evaluates our ability to go through really tough terrain like rocks and like really steep slopes and stuff like that. And then the main part of the competition, which is worth like 40% of the overall competition's points, is the endurance race. And that's a 4-hour head-to-head competition with like all 100 teams that are part of the competition. So it's a really, really tough race, but it's, yeah, where we're going through a lot of different obstacles. And some of like the main design goals, since we're making it for all these different dynamic events, yeah, our main design goals are speed and power, maneuverability and durability. And so like, yeah, for speed and power, trying to like optimize our drivetrain to kind of pick the best gear ratio and like different subsystems of that to enable that. And then for maneuverability, we're trying to optimize our suspension as well as our drivetrain for that. And then durability, since we're going through such like a tough competition with like a 4-hour endurance race and all these like really difficult obstacles that a lot of them could break our car if we don't build them well enough. So we're designing all of our parts to have a lot of durability in them. Now moving on to the car that we see in the museum. All right, so the car that we see in the museum outside is the OR7. Just some overall stats about it. It's about 350 pounds. It's a 4-wheel drive vehicle, which we'll talk a little bit more about like why we made it 4-wheel drive like recently, a little bit later. And then for the engine in the vehicle, we have a 10 horsepower engine from Briggs & Stratton, and we use a belt-driven continuously variable transmission as our like gear shifting. Some of the competition results that we have recently. So this car is from 2 years ago, and we placed 7th at the Tennessee competition, and then we also got 4th in sled pull. And during our second competition of that season, it was at Rochester, and during that competition, we had a little like failure during the main endurance race where the drive shaft tolerances or one of the shaft tolerances wasn't exactly the best for manufacturing. So over time, we ended up the gearbox kind of like broke. But yeah, we weren't able to compete after that. But
our gearbox exploded. It
yeah.
didn't so some highlights of the car itself. So this was our second year doing four-wheel drive. The previous year, the Baja SAE competition said that you can use four-wheel drive to get extra points. And then last year was the first year that it was mandated. But this car was our second year doing four-wheel drive. And because of that, there are a lot of interesting things about it. So the previous year, we had learned all about what load cases there are for four-wheel drive, because it's very different than two-wheel drive. So we optimized our chassis and all of our parts for a four-wheel drive car. We also created a custom differential. The previous year we had bought a differential, but this year we completely designed and manufactured our own differential. And then we also made a custom steering rack. Yeah, so that was pretty cool. And then lessons learned. So the big thing is you heard a lot about all of the innovations that we did with this car, but what really made it a great car is it was super reliable, super durable, and that's what really got us through Tennessee, getting that 7th place. However, you heard at Rochester that we broke because of improper manufacturing. So a big thing for our team right now is making sure that we're getting those tolerances really perfect so that we can make a reliable car. And then the last thing is just planning for the worst case scenario. We make dozens of spares now. Probably half of our manufacturing is just making spares. So with Baja SE, they're trying to break your car, so we're going to make a car that doesn't break, and if it does break, we have a plan. So yeah, we're in the middle of designing our next car, OR9. We're going to take all these lessons into that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Hey everybody, thank you again for coming out. We are standing on this side. We are GT Motorsports, the IC FSAE team here at Tech. You're gonna show them? Thank you. And we're excited to tell you today about car 70, who's sitting outside.
All right, so I'm Marvin Tian, a 4th-year mechanical engineering major here at Georgia Tech. And yeah, I'm the chief engineer for GT Motorsports.
And I'm Eli Kupperman, and when I'm not being made fun of for being a business major, I'm the team lead of GT Motorsports. So who are we? So GTMS is, like I said, the internal combustion engine SAE team at Tech. Again, we are the 3rd of the SAE teams here in the SEC. We are the oldest. We were founded in 1986 and have been competing in the majority of those years since then. Our operating size is about 85 members from all across the Institute, varying majors. Like the other teams, we try to focus on breadth of knowledge and experience. The photo you see there are a triumphant photo holding car 82, which is the one that competed in this May. We achieved 7th out of 122 teams in May. Super, super proud. That is our best result since 2004, our first top 10 since 2008. SAE, with the internal combustion engine, we had 122 teams, like I said, from all around the world. The events are held both in Europe and in the US. We compete at Michigan International Speedway, like HyTech as well, just the month before.
All right, so what do we build? So starting with the vehicle, these vehicles are open-wheel formula-styled race cars, powered by some sort of internal combustion engine. So for us, that'd be the Honda CBR 600RR engine, which, for those who don't know, is an inline 4-cylinder engine. So these vehicles usually weigh in at around the mid 400-pound range. And the biggest thing about this competition is that almost everything is designed and built by students in-house at their universities. So kind of going into what the competition is, much like HyTech, the goal is to build a vehicle that can be commercially available to race teams, which allows this team to be set up much like a small business, which is excellent for getting into the kind of industry level experience that students get to achieve on this team. So going to specifics of the vehicle that you see out there, that would be Car 70, which was designed for the 2020 competition in Michigan, but did not get to compete until 2022 because, as you guys know, people got sick and there's COVID around, so wouldn't want to be getting into that. So yeah, this vehicle finished 23rd overall in the event due to an unfortunate endurance-related accident. You'll see this is a common theme across FSA vehicles. But halfway through endurance, the car veered off into a couple 7 cones, and the front wing failed, and unfortunately we did not finish in the kind of high standing that we were on track to. But just more things to learn for future years. But it did do well in the events that it did complete, including 4th in skid pad, which is the highest placement in a dynamic event we've done in the recent years. So now getting into some technical aspects of this vehicle. So this particular one, it's approximately 75 horsepower. And like I mentioned earlier, this team is broken up into subsystems like a business. So I'll kind of walk through what the subsystems are and kind of say one interesting thing about each design task. So starting with the aerodynamics of the vehicle, which is the first thing you'll see from the outside. This particular vehicle featured greatly advanced aerodynamic features compared to previous vehicles, one of the biggest being the under tray that I ran this year. That was the first year we'd ran a under tray in a long time, our FSA cars. And that's validated through CFD technologies, which is huge in industry, but you don't get to learn as much in classes. But yeah, and this aero package was completely manufactured in-house. It was actually the first project I worked on when I came in as a freshman. And then going on to chassis, this chassis is completely manufactured in-house as well. We use MDF jigs to position all the tubes, all welded by students, so great learning experience there. And then going on to driver controls, some innovative features here include our in-house designed seat, which was designed using scans that we were actually able to do at the university of our drivers. And being that this competition focuses on a commercially available vehicle, the seat was an average of multiple drivers, which we then had padding to properly fit everyone. And then another interesting component is our pedal box, depicted not in this image, but that was actually analyzed using structural FEA, which for those who don't know is finite element analysis. We were actually able to create a topological optimized shape, which is kind of, if you've ever seen those really organic looking like engineer CAD parts, we basically were able to design that and then make it manufacturable in-house. And then moving on from controls for powertrain, we were able to, this was the first year we ran a new validated plenum design, which for those who don't know, the plenum is the part that distributes the air into the engine. That was validated using CFD software, which is a flow visualization software, allowing us to make sure that the air was getting properly distributed throughout the engine. And then for suspension, this vehicle features a double wishbone pushrod actuated suspension, which basically helps linearize the suspension action on our coil damper setup. I hope you guys are kind of car people, because that's what, but I have a point to make at the end. And then going into electrical, wiring harness, also completely made by students. Same with our power distribution module, which we're able to design our own PCBs and get that experience for electrical members. And then, yeah, so that's our subsystem. And if you've noticed while I'm talking, everything I'm saying involves in-house design, our students. The biggest thing is that people on this team are able to learn and use softwares and techniques that you'd really only learn in this industry during internships. And getting the opportunity to do that in the classroom, well, actually not in the classroom, in our shop, is incredibly valuable once you get in industry. And for me, I felt like it's where I've grown the most as an engineer.
Yeah, and real quick about 70, something I love to point out when I was treasurer of the space, I love Kyle and Condon, their budget of $2,000. 70 cost about $80,000. 82 that got 7th place cost about $150,000. And this year we have $250,000 for this year's car. So coming to the SEC, you have all kinds of different tasks, different challenges, different constraints. And it's something that makes all the teams super unique as you move down our little pit row in the shop. So obviously we spoke about how 70 unfortunately wasn't able to finish as high up in the standings as we wanted it to and as we knew it could. But that doesn't mean that we, A, love it any less, and B, didn't learn anything from it. So 70 was our first car back since COVID. Like I said before, we've been around a long time, but the difficulties with these teams is that every 4 years you have a complete fresh slate, you know, on average with students graduating, and retention of knowledge is something, yeah, thanks. Retention of knowledge is something that's particularly difficult on these teams. And so getting back in the swing of competing with 70 was massive for the growth of our team. The fact that it was able to do so well in events like Skid Pad, we won the business presentation that year. It was just a big moment of triumph for us. Only 3 people that were at that competition in Michigan had ever been in the competition environment before. So 3 of the 30. So the other 27 of us were scrambling around like chickens with our heads cut off. But we figured it out. And that meant that when we competed with 82, there were a lot more folks there who were prepared, who were ready to do the quick fixes, and were able to, you know, really push us to the top there. And that was all because of our experience with 70. And, you know, all those guys there having their Top Gun moment with 70, I hope show just how much we really care for this car, learn from this car. Thank you guys so much. That's us with 82 this year at the smaller of our 2 competitions. I believe I'll be handing it back to Bruce.
Okay, so what we'd like to do is open it up for questions to the students. And if you would, we'll have some microphones here, and hopefully you'll let us get the microphone to you. Because we were recording this, and so we won't be able to hear the question if you're not on the microphone. I'm going to pass a couple microphones to the students just to hold on to. Yeah, if you guys would. That'd be terrific. Okay.
Hi. Thrilled to be here. Totally amazed at what all y'all are doing on the campus. I'm the class of 70 and 80, no, 77 and 80. Anyway, but one of the things one of y'all said is that these competitions are like a week long. So I'm curious, how do you do that? Is that during the academic year? How do you work with your professors and with others to stay on task academically as well as be able to be successful in all that you're doing?
I guess I said the 7-week thing. So yeah, the competition is after school ends. So most people are working during the summer, so they're probably at their internships. It's not that hard to get a week off. During the year, it is pretty challenging to balance school with work at our shops, and that can get a bit tricky. Usually, when people take big roles on the team, the GPA does tank a little bit for some of us, at least for our team. But I'm just being honest here. But yeah.
Yeah, and for solar, I guess I didn't mention the kind of span of it. So we have on the even years, when we have the American Solar Challenge, we're actually out there for 2+ weeks. So for the students who are going to the race, we have to get from Atlanta to Kansas, race in Kansas. Then we go from Kansas to Missouri, and then we're there for like a week racing, and then we have to get all the way back to Atlanta. So it's a lot of time, but like they said, a lot of the internships that they get are because of the experience that we have from these teams. So these companies, the first thing that I talk about in an interview is, and the first thing that they see in my resume sometimes is Georgia Tech Solar Racing. Oh my gosh, tell me what is solar racing? What do you do? And that's generally the big ticket of what they're trying to look for, because they know exactly what you get out of these teams. And so they're more than eager to give you the chance to go take that week off. Sometimes it's paid. Most times I feel like it's unpaid, which is unfortunate. But we take that time off to go to the race, and they're more than happy to. And as soon as we come back, they're like, oh my gosh, how did it go? Tell me everything. So yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
And a big thing about these competitions, not just at comp, but also throughout the year, Of course, you have those like hardcore students that are in there like 40+ hours a week, but realistically, this is not just an engineering competition, it's largely an engineering management competition. The big part of it is how well can, as executive leadership and as leads on the team, how well can we manage the team such that we can get this much work done while also pursuing a vigorous, academic career.
One quick thing is that when there are competitions during the school year, they are institute approved absences, luckily, since we are organizations under Georgia Tech. So it's just a quick logistics thing. I know off-road had a lot of fun missing all sorts of finals and all those unimportant things compared to what we do here.
Are you able to get some student credit for some of the work you do in this?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Some of the teams, that is always a lovely issue. Some of the teams are able to operate as vertically integrated projects. EcoCAR, who's not here, exclusively operates as such. In years past, some of the teams take on kind of a research role where maybe part of the team are like written on as research assistants and get credit that way. Unfortunately, sometimes it's hard to say, you're both a student club and a research center. That's something we've been looking in a lot more recently, but for the most part, the payoff here isn't in course credit. It's in, like Ariana said, where we go afterwards, the experience we have, and what we're able to share with potential recruiters, and also just how much fun it is.
Question to the Baja team. You had mentioned that you designed and manufactured your own differential. And that sounds a bit more complex than taking off-the-shelf or junkyard parts or commercially available parts and bolting them together, nut and bolting them together and doing your welding and that type of thing. Can you talk a little bit about how you actually did that?
Yeah, so the guy who designed the custom differential, he was a previous chief engineer, and he had gone through like the entire kind of like ME curriculum basically, and he had actually stayed like that extra like fall semester, like he was finishing up his classes, but he kind of spent like during the summer and during the fall designing that whole thing. But yeah, I guess.
Did you have to have somebody cast, for example, the housing, the differential housing, if this was a one-off type of thing?
Yeah, so all the components, all like the metal components on the car or on that custom differential we like manufactured in house. So like the casing of it, we did fully CNC'd. It was actually 3 parts, like the left side, the right side, and then kind of like the bump out as the input. So we all 3 of those components took like multiple like CNC operations to make, and then for the internals there was like the actual kind of planetary set. So all those gears we lathed them in house, and then we sent them off to a gear manufacturer to get the gears cut out. But then and then a lot of other standard like hardware components like bolts and stuff and bearings we just ordered. But yeah, all of it was completely custom designed, and all those custom components were made in house.
That's great. Just quickly, are any of the students involved with more than one of the teams? In other words, you have some students that are involved in multiple teams.
Yeah, so I think on off-road we have one person who's involved with multiple teams. As I think Eli was saying, people work up to 40 hours a week on these, so it's a little tricky to work on both, but we definitely have people who have been actually in leadership positions in 2 at the same time.
There are obviously transferable skills between them. But when it comes down to the real nitty-gritty of the competitions, as you can tell, yes, we're all in the Student Competition Center, but what we do, what we build, and like the way in which we race are all drastically different. So we find it most effective both within the teams on subsystems, breaking it up that way, but also between teams to be a lot more effective, to become master of one trade, not trying to be, jack of all trades, master of none. So that's kind of the model that we've taken on.
I was just curious to know if there's anyone here that actually drove one of these vehicles. You did. Yeah. You actually drove them. Which one did you drive?
I drove the 300ZX at the last competition, and I drove the S10 at the previous competition.
I was not one of the drivers at the race, but I have driven in our vehicle. It is a lot different than a normal car. I'm not sure. I mean, there's more like a normal car. Ours brakes a lot different. We have regenerative braking with both and also mechanical brake. But getting into that car, you have to like step into it and then kind of finagle yourself into there. And that's why we do a lot of driver training. All of the teams have all student drivers. So we do a lot of driver practice, driver selection to make sure that the students are being safe, because that is the #1 priority in our space. But yeah.
And a big feat of engineering that a lot of these teams have to overcome is being able to accommodate a wide range of drivers. So for our competition, that's 95th to 5th percentile, dimensions of a person. So to test that, even I have fit in our small race car and attempted to drive it. So kind of did it.
Not so bad to take naps in. We get judged based on ergonomics and comfort. And Emily, who's over here, is one of our driver controls leads, and Marvin is a former driver controls lead, and Alex, wherever he may be, is hi Alex, ergonomics lead on Motorsports, and I've definitely dozed off sitting in the car.
Since your program has been around for quite a while now, do you have any graduates that are heavily involved in any competition series, such as IndyCars or Formula One?
Yeah, actually, I was invited to an IndyCar race by one of the teams because I plan on being one of those graduates. But on the grid, I met up with one of our former chief engineers, who is currently a R&D engineer at Andretti in IndyCar. At Chip Ganassi Racing. And then we have another former chief engineer who currently does suspension on Andretti. And then we have another graduate in higher up in one of the NASCAR teams that I'm forgetting. I know that HyTech currently, the individual that designed the aero package on HTO7, correct me if I'm wrong, is currently at Mercedes Formula One. So, this is the collegiate, you'd like to think it's as close as you can get to collegiate experience in those high-level series. And, sometimes they recognize that and pluck us, and we get to continue on with this.
This is more of a comment than a question. I've been attending your on-campus car show, usually held in late March, since about 2005, and I'm hoping that after a 4-year absence, you can hold it again in 2024. And I've always appreciated going over to the area where cars like this were on display over the years. And as an engineer myself, I've enjoyed seeing the various types of cars and the different technologies that go into them. And I hope that if you do put on a car show this coming spring, that everyone in this room might be interested in attending. And I must say, you're lucky to be living in this era, because I went to college in the early 70s at another Southern university. And back then, there weren't annual or even every 4-year type competitions like this. They were very rare in all aspects, not just automotive. So you're lucky that you're living in an era when you have these various competitions, and not just cars. I'm thinking in terms of the steel bridge competition, the concrete canoe competition, and more like that. So consider yourselves fortunate that you're in an era when intercollegiate engineering competitions are taking place, and you all should be congratulated for your efforts.
Anyone else? Oh, okay.
So for rec racing, I think y'all have had some also that were in Champ Car, haven't you? Or was that not part of the team, just Georgia Tech students that have done Champ Car, Lemons, done some of those events?
Back in the day, I know, looking through our archives, that we've competed in different series, a little more track-based. But as for now, the cars that we're putting together, I don't think you'd want to take it on a track. More so because we're trying to push the envelope for our competition and make things that are crazier and crazier every year. Because if we show up with the same big engine, small car, the design review portion gets kind of boring every year. So every 2 years, we're looking to build a car that does something that we've never done before, so we can grow our knowledge base and also just build something that all the people at the competition will enjoy. Because every year we come back and all the people, they comment that our club is something that they look forward to seeing what we bring to comp every year. So I guess that's a reason we haven't really done that in recent years. It's a lot to do 2 competitions a year and kind of expand the envelope of that. So for now, we just compete in the grassroots challenge, which we're happy with. So.
How do you feel about, with the designs and the changes y'all are able to do, how much are you enjoying that there's no longer the car show part of it, that is now more design instead of the going, ooh, how well did you fix it up? How well did you make it look? Now it's more, how well did you design it?
Yeah, so I guess part of it is looks, because obviously a cool looking car is better than one that doesn't look cool. But I would say that we're trying to do different things with engineering so that we can point at our car and say, like this year we took a Honda engine and we had a Subaru transmission, and we created an adapter plate so that they would link up, because normally Subaru Honda, that doesn't really work. So yeah, we're just looking to push the envelope engineering wise, while also keeping the cars looking cool with the Georgia Tech livery. So, yeah.
I'll add one more thing. Our alumni association, at least for rec racing, is like very tight knit. So like at our last competition, I think we had 4 rec racing former cars there that alumni just like fell in love with, and they keep working on it and they bring it back. And we had alumni that compete in the competition with their own vehicles, whether it's a flipped over Nissan, what is it? We just call it Flipper because it rolled over, and he brought it to competition. He has a great time. So, yeah, everybody loves the competition, and they come back every year, and it's awesome.
What other schools tend to be your greatest competitors, or is there a steady stream, or have you guys, does it vary year from year?
So there's only like usually 2 or 3 other schools that compete, and usually they aren't super challenging to compete against. It's usually the old heads in their garage that have all of the time in the world to compete and build an amazing car. Last year we got beat out by a rec racing alum who spent too much time in the garage and built a very fast Mazda Miata with an N54 and a turbo kit and stuff. But the year before that, if you find on Instagram, there's No Cones Racing. He was even featured on, was it Donut Media? Yeah, I think he was featured on Donut Media. So it's just, yeah, it's a lot of people who just love engineering and love going to junkyards and building things on a budget. So yeah, definitely old people that we struggle with.
Yeah, and I think in general for all the teams outside of rec who has a very interesting competition, just a common thread is the biggest engineering schools that have the best programs, that's our competition. So we're in the same name or in the same vein with the Michigans, Purdue's. If it's a top 5, top 10 technical or engineering school that has a team, they're competing against us in all these competitions. And getting all of the teams together to be competing in those top 5s with those schools is really always the goal.
Formula SAE, the big kicker is University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. They won the last 2 internal combustion engine Michigans and the event before that in Lincoln, but now they went electric, so they're his problem. So not my, sounds good to me.
Yeah, and a cool thing with a lot of these teams is we get to compete with not only universities in the U.S., but also around the world, whether that's Canada, Latin America, for a lot of the formula competitions. That used to be a lot of the German teams. I think they're still at you guys', right? Okay, gotcha. They used to be huge in our IC division. But yeah, it's a great experience getting to compete with universities from all over the world, hear about their experiences, how education is in other countries. So yeah, it's awesome to get to see that.
So I mean, just because success is great, but talk about your worst failure, and because really it's what goes through my mind. What is the second thing you did? Obviously, the first thing you did was to say something dirty and to be unhappy about it. But I mean, how do you? I mean, all of you are dealing with adversity. But what was your failure? What was the second thing that happened?
We'll go down the line and I'll go first because mine happened like a month ago. At least it's what comes to mind. While our former chief engineer before Marvin on Motorsports was taking a well-deserved vacation for one weekend after he had been out elected for the next year, I was helping Powertrain replace the firewall on our car, and it tends to help if you don't put metal sheets in contact with car battery, and I shorted the entirety of car 82. So there was a lot of smoke, and the second thing I did was find the fire extinguishers because I know where they're at because I put them there. So the moral of the story is know where to go next.
So in ASC in 2021, the American Solar Challenge Cross Country, we have the people in the chase and lead cars were personal cars, so they're very small. We have 4 people, 5 people shoved in a car, and we're looking at our race book. So that it shows us the entire route that we take, every single turn, every single stop sign, if there's construction along the route, everything. And so we have the navigator, and the navigator was looking through this sheet, looking what's next. We were feeling pretty confident. We were going like 40 miles per hour, which maybe not is super confident for the other teams, but pretty confident for us. And our navigator's slipping through, and he's like, there's a cattle guard. What is this? And we went over it, and we're like, okay. And the solar car is right behind us, and they went over it, which if you don't know what it is, there's a big old hole in the ground with a bunch of metal plates to keep the cattle from crossing into the highway. And all 4 wheels of the solar car left the ground and then landed back on the ground and kind of skid. And our driver said, "This is solar to lead. What in the heck was that? Why didn't you tell me about that?" And we kept driving. We finished that. We made it to our stage point for that day. Found that there was a piece of the frame that was supposed to be connected that was no longer connected. And we managed to do a lot of different analysis to make sure that we could, if we needed to take apart everything from the car and re-weld stuff, but we had to race the next day at 9 a.m., which involves a full disintegration of everything on the car in order to safely weld. And thankfully we didn't have to, but our number 1 lesson learned from that is read through the entire race book, and if there's something that you don't know what it is, maybe you should know what it is because they put it in there for a reason. So yeah, that's us.
Well, a lot of things went wrong last year. Going back to our competition, though, that was the biggest thing right before endurance. What specifically happened was our electric car. There's 2 modes. So right before you start running the car, you latch the car. That means high voltage is running through the car. And then you enter ready to drive. So in our competition, we had latched the car, but we weren't getting ready to drive. So the car was not running when we pressed the pedal. And as I mentioned, we heard the radio call in the paddock that our car wasn't running. And for the first minute, people were very, very sad. Our chief engineer who was supposed to drive the car came fuming down. And everybody was really scared. But as Jake mentioned, after the first couple of minutes or so, you take the car back. And it's actually a pretty boring process because all the other engineers were just sitting, and our 5 electrical team members were probing different points along the car, seeing what's wrong. So nothing exciting going on, just a basic root cause analysis. But eventually we did get a solution or the solution to the problem that we had. And it was a pedal sensor that broke, probably because a driver accidentally hit it while accelerating the car. And it's not the most exciting story, but it was actually what happened. So yeah.
Yeah, so GT Off-Road is kind of unique because the competition is made to break our car. So all of our failures, like we have a lot of them, but one kind of cool thing about us is that we're very proud of our failures. We have a wall in our office that is completely filled with every part that's broken, and I have a couple things on there. I think the most dramatic failure was what I talked about in the presentation, which was our gearbox exploding. And we kind of knew that it was going to happen beforehand. We knew that our drive shaft was the wrong size, and the whole time we were being told, we're just gonna run until we have to cut off our drive shaft, basically. But it ended up exploding our gearbox. And I remember afterwards, we opened it up, and we looked at it, and we all talked about what the failure cases were. Like, we were like, oh, this failed in shear, and this failed in whatever. So we learned a lot about it. I'm gonna let Steven talk about what we actually did, because he was our drivetrain lead last year.
Yeah, so basically we opened it up, and like the case itself, like the whole thing was like bent up, like the whole gearbox, because essentially what happened was like one of the kind of like cyclical loading from the U-joint into the drive shaft caused the shaft in the input shaft, or I guess the output shaft of the transfer case, like was wobbling so much that with the miter gears too, it started wobbling the entire internals of the gears, and it basically caught on the inside of the case, and then the whole thing just seized up. So yeah, and then like you could see like the inside of the gears, like the kind of like the arms of the gears, like they'd completely just sheared across from each other. There's no transmission at all in that transfer case, but yeah, that was kind of crazy. But yeah, this year, I mean, I guess this past year too, we've designed the output of our transfer case to have a lot tighter tolerances and make sure we're actually like hitting that. And then we also added a retaining ring to make sure that it's not going to be moving around and oscillating as much. But yeah.
I'm going to talk about the second year with the S10. We completely snapped a lower control arm. And people were driving and they're like, this turns really funny. I'm like, all right, let me try. And it was just turning one way only. So I took it back into our like paddock area, and I pulled off the control arm, and I went up to a friend. I was like, you have any spare steel? And he gave me this like really thick tube. So there I was with an angle grinder and a MIG welder, and I sleeved the control arm on the ground, and I welded it back together, and we were back up and running. I think I really learned that you really shouldn't doubt the capabilities of an angle grinder and a MIG welder. I think that our competition, like, things break every time. We broke our throttle cable this year, and we put it back together with like wire crimps. So I think that we really just like get practical and figure out solutions to our problems as quick as possible, and it usually works out for us. So, yeah.
Yeah, our competition's a little different in that the actual length that the car has to work for is technically one autocross run and one drag pass. So that's maybe like a 50-second autocross run, and last year it was a 15-second drag pass. But if something goes wrong, we have to fix it. And with all the different parts we it's in a little more organized fashion than that. But there's parts from all over the place that don't usually fit together, and we have to make them fit together. So when things go wrong, there's not just off-the-shelf part that we can just bolt in. We have to get creative, like Condon said. So we're coming up with things on the fly, and it's a little different sort of test than I guess sitting at a computer and doing all the analysis beforehand, and that we just have to act and go with our gut, and like Condon said, sometimes a welder and an angle grinder, and come up with a solution so that we can get the car back on the track and able to finish the event. So yeah.
Yeah, so on my time on the team, it's been a couple years, so I've seen a couple things. Yeah, so I guess I'll start with a couple notable mentions and then talk about our most recent one. But yeah, my freshman year, got to see a car drive around with a 4-foot fireball behind it because we shot a rod through the block, and oil and gas mixture was spraying out. And my second year, we had that car that just had a tendency to hit things, and hit concrete walls, cones, just tons of crashes. But the most recent issue, which I'll talk about, it's not as interesting, but we definitely learned the most from, is recently at comp we had well, to preface, one of the things you have to pass is your sound test. So you have to be under a certain sound threshold, which is given in, well, it's measured in dBc in the rule book, but if you measure it in dBA, which is accounted for the human ear, you don't get all the vibrations that's outputting. So we got to comp, did our test, wondering why we were louder than we thought, louder than our test back in shop. Realized we used the wrong sound testing scale, and had to, rush to get a second muffler on our car, which our cars are already optimized to be really light. We had a titanium exhaust system with custom titanium muffler. So now there's a full-size automotive exhaust, which we welded in the wind, which there's a phrase that like a good welder should be able to weld a fart to a rainbow in a thunderstorm. But I guess not many of us are that good welders, and yeah, it was pretty interesting. Laying down with everyone, laying tarps over me, trying to weld. Not only the car was broken, I also had a broken leg at that part of my life. So it was just a grand old time. And in the end, we had about an hour and a half to complete a full day's worth of dynamic events. But we're still able to get our runs in and finish well. So good learning experience. And kind of what we get out of that and all these failures is, right when we get back from comp, immediately start documenting every single thing that happened, make sure we learn from this experience, because ultimately that's kind of the biggest learning opportunities you get in engineering. So, I have a pretty awesome professor this semester, and he always talks about how every design is a design failure, and that's how you learn. If every design were to succeed, there'd never be a new iteration of a car, a new iteration of a product. So the biggest thing is just to document everything, learn why it failed, to make sure we never do that again, implement methods such that we catch these kind of things, and just properly manage the team such that that never happens again.
Yeah, to go off of that, with car 70 specifically, we were very confident in how our competition was shaping up towards the end. Like I said, we were tracking top 5. Which would have been amazing by any measurement. And to fail in the last event in the dramatic fashion that we did, punting cones everywhere and snapping things, kind of put the team into a state of shock, as you can imagine, going from a really high on lap 8 of 10, thinking that we're going to finish and bring home a really nice trophy, to bringing back a broken front wing and a bunch of sad students. It was a big drop, but that kind of lesson in learning how to deal with that definitely helped with 82 15-fold. We didn't take any success for granted. We were always looking for failures. Our testing was much more rigorous. Our understanding of the importance of driver practice, just having experience with the car, and not needing, especially in endurance, not needing the fastest time, but needing to have all of your lap times in, became obviously apparent. And so with the team, it was a lot of managing expectations, experienced comp members. Like Marvin said, our muffler, he didn't put it as dramatic as I think it really was. We were preparing to go home without ever racing because car 82 was too loud. We didn't pass technical inspection, which means you're not allowed to drive at all. And so a year's worth of work, well, 2 years since we're on the 2-year design cycle worth of work, a ton of expectations to do very well. We thought, I would remember I was sitting with Emily against the fence thinking, how was I going to console this team into coming back to competition next year? And so in that hour and a half when we finally passed sound and we were running around Michigan International Speedway in the damp, just making adjustments on the car while it was moving. I think someone has a video of us just sprinting across the infield with the car. It was in those moments where all of our preparation and practice actually managed to play a part in putting us through to the end.
Okay, well, thank you. Those are great stories. That's a great question there, Jake. One more, and then we'll wrap up.
I assume that all of you or most of you are planning on getting employed in the automotive industry. And I was just wondering, for those of you who've already talked to recruiters or HR people, has your participation in these competitions been a real benefit in helping you, get a job?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is the first thing that comes up in interviews. For most of us, it's either our primary, or for most of us, our primary and only club experience at Tech because of how demanding leadership can be in these environments. But because of the nature of them as small businesses, as managing people, I mean, the teams all vary in size, but it's all managing over 50 people for the most part for all of us. Recruiters find that experience unique and interesting, and they know how intense it can be, and the kind of pressure that the time constraints and budget constraints put on us. And so, before I was team lead, I was sponsorship lead, and that's what I told all of the sponsors, and that's why they're willing to support us and want to come recruit from these teams specifically. And it's definitely the value that our students get from being in those environments.
How many of us got an internship because of this club? Everyone in the audience can raise their hand too. Yeah. How many of them were sponsors or worked directly with the club also? Yeah. So, yeah, I had my internship at GM last summer. It was a great experience, and that was only because of this club. I would not have done it without it.
I'll say that, interviewers love to ask STAR questions, which is situation, task, action, result. And this is the only thing I talk about. My friends will come up to me and they're like, how do you do STAR interview questions? I'm like, you just face a lot of problems in rec racing or off-road or GTMS. As an engineer, facing problems, working through it, and that's where you get your experience, and that's how I got a job.
Yeah, and let me mention, because you guys probably don't know my background, but I used to work at Bosch before I retired, and I was an engineering manager in powertrain, hired a lot of engineers, and that was one of the first things we always looked at, especially in powertrain, was if they had, we always said SAE, but, we know that's everybody here. That was, one of the first things that we looked at on the resumes was, if they were into that. So it is a good question, and I can tell you that we hired a lot of people, and they were really ones we looked at first was if they were doing these kind of competitions. Okay, so I think that's about it. So we'd like to thank everybody for being here, and thanks to the students for coming here on a Saturday. Really appreciate. So.